or the negligence of our policy.
Next question.
It turns out that it's Environment Canada that is going to the Rotterdam conference, or the conference in Geneva. And I got a very anodyne statement from them last night saying that Canada is still developing its position, that the conference in the past hasn't been able to reach consensus on this product. There was like, they completely washed their hands of a Canadian position on this. I'm wondering whether, to your mind, that A, signals that it may be changing, or that they don't want to take ownership of this.
To this point, and anyone else wants to jump into this, we've seen no change in the Canadian position. To suggest that there hasn't been a consensus is to forgive all of the travesty that has been the Canadian work and effort up until now. I think what's most egregious about this is that the government of Canada has stopped reflecting the views of Canadians a long time ago on asbestos. That overwhelmingly throughout Canada and in Quebec, the mood and the sentiment is to ban the export of asbestos from Canada. Now, the Canadian government, as Pat has said, goes and actively seeks to sabotage the efforts of all of the rest of the world to actually put a label on this stuff so that we understand what we know here in Canada. It is not safe to handle. Any use is not a safe use. Now, for the cheap and most crass political motivations, this government and previous governments of Canada have chosen to override all of the science, all of our knowledge, and perform the worst case of hypocrisy, which is to do something to somebody else which we would never do to ourselves, which is to expose the population to a known carcinogen. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment. Steve, you okay? Good. Yeah? Huh?
I wouldn't mind, just because,
yeah, of course.
Just because the question is specifically about what they do when they get there. I was at the one in Rome, and I watched the Canadian delegation specifically take active steps to undermine the motion to list chrysotile. They went to our donor countries, and they, instead of doing the dirty work themselves, they garnered the support of smaller countries and sent them to the mics. Indonesia, actually India, not a small country, but our the largest country we export to. They came with their asbestos manufacturing industry, the Indian delegation. So 2 Indian officials and 10 or 12 Indian asbestos manufacturers went to the mic. And let's keep in mind the Rotterdam Convention doesn't operate on majority vote. It operates on consensus. So once 2 or 3 countries go to the mics and say, we're not comfortable with this, it's dead for another 3 years. And that's all Canada had to do, and that's what they took active steps. So I think they're lying to you when they say they haven't got a position. The Prime Minister just reconfirmed their position. He stood up and brazenly said the Conservative Party is the only party that actively promotes and supports the asbestos industry, as if it's something to be proud of. Just a few weeks ago. Perhaps.
Harper said that he will not put Canadian industry in a position where it's discriminated against. And how do you think Canada's asbestos industry, especially those important partners in Quebec, would respond to an outright ban on asbestos?
Well, no Canadian commodity enjoys the level of support asbestos does. The Asbestos Institute themselves brag they've had 160 trade delegations in 60 different countries. We don't promote softwood lumber to that extent. We don't support wheat to that extent. So they can hardly claim that they're hard done by. I mean, they use our foreign missions and our trade commissioners in all these countries to shove this product down the throats of unsuspecting third world and developing nations without even a warning label on it. And what would it do? If Canada joined the global ban, there's 50 countries now that have banned asbestos in all of its forms. If Canada had the courage, had the intestinal fortitude to join that ban, then the asbestos industry in this country would be shut down. And 200 or 300 workers would have to be transitioned into a type of work that's not going to kill them. I used to work in the asbestos mines. You're not doing anybody any favor to save their job working in an asbestos mine. The workers in the asbestos regions of Quebec have some of the highest rates of asbestos-related disease in the world. So don't make me laugh. You're not doing anybody any favor. You're doing them a favor to transition them out of that disease factory. But Canada's action at Rotterdam actually sabotages, it undermines the integrity of the entire convention. There's now talk of scrapping the whole Rotterdam Convention because Canada consistently screws it up. by letting commercial and political interests override science. And that's the death knell of a once noble initiative. That's enough for me. I should let somebody else talk.
Okay, you okay?
Vous remettez ce matin de Santé Canada.
Ouais.
Quelle importance du courriel? Qu'est-ce que ça change au débat qu'on a vu jusqu'à maintenant?
Ouais, quelqu'un va lire ça?
De fait, c'est scandaleux, puisque ça montre qu'au Canada, sur ce sujet précis, les faits passent après. La protection de la santé publique passe après la protection d'un intérêt particulier. Et c'est scandaleux que ça puisse survenir sur la scène nationale. Il y a déjà qu'au Québec, qu'on est pogné avec le même problème où les avis et les travaux très sérieusement réalisés par l'Institut national de santé publique, comprenez-vous, ne font pas un pli sur la différence de l'indignité de notre politique provinciale en matière d'amiante. Et là, on s'aperçoit que, de fait, on a exactement le même scénario qui est agissant entre le ministère de la Santé qui ne réussit pas à faire prévaloir l'importance de tenir compte justement de tous les faits scientifiques bien établis. Imaginons que au lieu de l'amiante, ce soit la tuberculose qui fasse l'objet de ce genre de mémo-là. Il y aurait une révolution. Mais c'est fondamentalement le même geste, la même attitude. Et c'est ça qui est scandaleux.
Ça change quelque chose par rapport à la position de Santé Canada qui était publique jusqu'à maintenant, ce qu'on voit dans ce courriel-là?
Pas du tout. Santé Canada, de fait, a l'obligation de tenir compte de tous les faits établis et d'aller là exactement où la conduisent les faits connus. Et en ce sens-là, Santé Canada est à l'auteur de sa mission. C'est l'autorité politique supérieure qui fait défaut à la confiance que les citoyens investissent dans nos leaders politiques d'ajuster leur conduite en matière de santé sur les faits connus.
Can you tell me what you know about asbestos and First Nations reserves?
Yes, well, virtually every public and institutional building in this country is contaminated by our zeal to promote asbestos through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, even today, but nowhere more so than on First Nations reserves. And there's been alarming outbreaks of asbestos-related cancers, clusters, that you don't see anywhere else in the world on First Nations reserves. The case of Raven Thundersky from my own riding, her and her family, 12 people growing up in a two-bedroom house. If you wanted any privacy, you crawled into the attic where it was filled with asbestos-filled zonalite insulation. It's 8 people in her family, which is unheard of around the world, are dying or have died from an asbestos-related disease. So, our promotion of asbestos is not benign in any way. It's actively killing people. And the cruel thing is the latency period, as was pointed out, 20, 30 years down the road, you have this very aggressive asbestos-related cancer killing you, and you trace it back to your exposure of playing in the attic when you were 8 years old on an Indian reserve. So First Nations, there was an effort made to try and clean up some of the death houses, they called them on reserves, the zonalite houses, where zonalite insulation was used. But military bases, Indian reserves, public buildings of all kinds, there's more jobs in the remediation of asbestos than there is in the extraction. So if you ask what are you going to do with the unemployed workers who are displaced, teach them how to remove, take some responsibility for Canada contaminating the planet with this stuff and become a center of excellence and world leaders in remediation and extraction or removal of asbestos instead of digging more of it out of the ground. That would be one option.
Pensez du fait que votre position aujourd'hui ne fasse pas écho à celle du gouvernement du Québec dans ce domaine-là, qui souvent dit qu'au Québec, c'est fait de façon sécuritaire et qui ont notamment prêté, donné une subvention de 58 millions pour la mine Jeffrey récemment?
C'est irresponsable, dans un premier temps. Et deuxièmement, ce n'est pas vrai. Je pense que le monde scientifique l'a déjà démontré depuis fort longtemps que ce n'est pas sécuritaire. Il n'y a aucune façon de traiter avec ce produit de façon sécuritaire. Je pense que tout le monde, la planète entière nous le dit. Et je pense qu'il est temps maintenant pour le gouvernement d'agir autrement par rapport à cette question. On propose des programmes de formation, de transition pour graduellement qu'on puisse remplacer les emplois qui seront affectés éventuellement si jamais on voit de l'avant avec ça. Mais c'est important aussi de rappeler, je reviens sur la question précédente, que la réputation du Canada est encore en péril par rapport à leur position au niveau international. Comme mon collègue, M. Martin, j'ai vu moi-même aussi comment des délégations canadiennes agissent dans ce genre de réunion où on exige le consensus des rencontres internationales. Et ils ont fait la même chose avec la Convention sur la biodiversité. Ils ont fait la même chose pour la Déclaration des Nations unies sur les peuples autochtones. C'est-à-dire, ils ont manœuvré avec d'autres pays pour qu'on évite d'atteindre le consensus sur les questions qui sont traitées aux Nations unies. Donc, encore là, la réputation du Canada va être sévèrement affectée par leur position la semaine prochaine s'ils ne changent pas leur position sur cette question-là.
Par contre, combien d'emplois on parle au Canada ou au Québec dans ce domaine-là?
200 peut-être. 200 full-time, as much as... I believe left in the Jeffrey mines, there's about 350 full-time jobs, but it's about 700 people working reduced hours. And even then, we're still one of the largest producers and exporters. They have stockpiled inventory. I believe 200,000 tons per year has been the average for the last number of years, give or take. We were begging the government, the Quebec government and the federal government, don't lend them the money they need to expand their mine. And sure enough, they loaned them the money they needed to expand their mine. So it's good for another 40 years with the new loan they just gave them, $58 million. But that's not the first money. Back in the Mulroney years, I found a Montreal Star newspaper, when there still was a Montreal Star, and it said, Mulroney gives $32 million to take the stink off the asbestos industry. That was 1984 that they were actively promoting this. I mean, it has nothing to do with reason or logic or science or economics. It's all about Quebec politics, and that's the frustrating thing, and that's what will be the end of the Rotterdam Convention if we allow politics and commercialism to trump science.
Maybe if there's one more question. The question? We'll do two quick questions.
Well, a question related to that, because every time asbestos comes back, I'm always wondering the same thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I read it was about 300 workers before. The amount of money that this industry generates, it's not that big, so why is there such a big push on the international scene for that product? Like, why is Canada being so forward with that? I'm just wondering every time why.
There's greater experts on the stage in terms of Quebec politics than me, but I was told by conservatives going into the last election that the new Democratic position on banning the export of asbestos would hurt us politically in Quebec. Apparently not. Apparently the people of Quebec are comfortable with the party standing up and saying that human health and worker safety are important as well, and that the promotion of this industry defies all logic, has been said. It's become a symbol for this government in its carrying the flag for Quebec. But Quebecers are ashamed that a government like Mr. Harper's government would run around the world saying the reason we're killing people in India and Indonesia is for our support of Quebec. It's clearly not in Quebec's interest, and clearly the New Democrats bringing 59 members of Parliament from Quebec to this Parliament has shown that Quebecers are well evolved past this government.
Same thing. Whether, you've got 59 members from Quebec, and you say it's all about Quebec politics. Whether there's been any pushback for you, but I guess you're saying no.
You could discuss it with Mr. Saganash and the other 58 members of Parliament. Mr. Mulcair and Mr. Layton went into Thetford Mines a number of years ago to explain our policy and what the impact would be in the region where this asbestos is mined, and came away with a better understanding and clearly a good conscience going into the election with a clear policy, which says for Quebecers, for Canadians,